Let's look at how we can change between scenes in Unity using UI elements or triggers. First, we're going to create a canvas. This can be used to put UI such as buttons on. So in this canvas, we're going to then want to create a button. This button will then be interactable, and this will allow us to change between scenes through code. We'll also need to implement TextMesh Pro. Now this is optional, however it does make sort of text in your project look nicer, and it's highly recommended by Unity. So I'm going to reposition this button just to make it nicer, and I'm also going to change sort of the text in it so that it's more clear on what we're doing. As you can see, you can change the proportions of the button through the inspector. This is on the right hand side of my screen. Finally, I'm going to add some text. This is just to identify sort of what scene we're in so that we know once we've changed that we're not still in the same one. Now we're going to create a new script. This is going to be called Scene Changer, and we're going to open that, and this is where we're going to start to code. Now don't worry, this is very simple. In fact, there will only be a few lines of code. So as you can see, we start with a start and an update function. We don't need either, so we're going to remove both. I'm then going to create a public void, and this is going to be called change scene. In this, I'm going to pass through a parameter, and this is going to be an integer. This is going to be called scene number. At the top of my code, I'm going to add unityengine.scenemanagement, as of course we're going to be wanting to change between scenes for our project. In our change scene function, we're going to add scenemanager.loadScene, and then in brackets we're going to put scene number. This is of course our parameter previously. We're then going to finish off with a semicolon, and that is essentially it. We're going to want to add this script to our canvas, and then we're going to go to our button, and you can see there'll be an on-click section. On this we're going to add a new sort of runtime event, and we're going to drag the canvas into sort of the box. Then where it says no function, we're going to go down and we're going to go to Scene Changer, which of course is our script, and we're going to then click Change Scene. And now you notice it wants a value. Now if we go to build settings in the top left, we can see we've only got scene 1. We want to also add our other scene, so in this case scene 2. And what you'll notice is on the right you'll see 0 and 1. That is the index number for each scene. So scene 1 has the index number of 0. So, as we want to go to scene 2, that had the index number of 1, so we'll put that there. Now if we run our program, you'll notice if we click it, it changes to scene 2. That's identified in the top left. I'm now on scene 2, outside of the play mode, and I'm repeating the steps we did earlier. So I'm adding a UI button, and this button is going to return us to scene 1. As you can see, I'm adding the script back to the canvas, and then I'm going to the button, and I'm adding the canvas into the on-click event. Through the function, I'm then adding the change scene, and this time the integer is 0, because scene 1 had the index number of 0. So now if I play the game, you'll notice we can go to scene 2 by pressing the button, and we can go back to scene 1 by pressing that button. So now let's look at how we can change scenes through the scene name instead of the scene number. To do this, I'm going to create a new function, and this is going to be called change scene by name. This time we're going to pass through a string, and this is going to be called the scene name. We're going to repeat the steps, and we're going to use scenemanager.loadScene, and we're going to put in the brackets scene name, because that is our parameter, and that is it. Now what we're going to have to change is here. Instead of scene change, we want scene change by name, and we're going to go to our sort of scene in our assets folder. As you can see, it's scene 2, so that's what we want to put there. And notice it is case sensitive. So now let's test that. And as you can see, if we click it, it does the exact same as before, meaning we can now change by the index number or the scene number. I've now altered our second scene to include a simple player controller. As you can see, it gets a rigid body, and then in the update function, if I push D, it moves it to the right, and if I'm not pushing D, it stops movement. So this is a very basic character controller, it just moves to the right. With this, we're going to look at how we can make a trigger so that when the player enters a specific area, it can then go to a different scene. So now I'm going to create a new 2D object. This is going to be a sprite, and it's going to be a square. This will be the object we collide with. I'm going to name this scene 1 because I'm going to actually have it so that it goes to the scene depending on the object's name, and of course we want it to go to scene 1. Now I'm going to move this object around, just moving it to the right and making it bigger. This means it will be easier to collide with. I'm also going to make it slightly transparent so it's not the same color as our character. In this, I'm also going to add a box collider 2D, and I'm going to make sure it is a trigger. This means that the object will be able to actually you can go in it and you won't collide with the edge. On our player, we're also going to want to add a box collider 2D. This time it will not be a trigger. So now let's go into our player controller script. We're going to want to create a new void, onTriggerEnter, and we're going to use 2D. Now onTriggerEnter would be used for 3D objects, and there is also onTriggerExit, exit 2D, stay, and stay 2D. And these can be used in various other ways as described. Once we've created this, we're going to also want to go to the top, and we're going to want to make sure we're using Unity Engine.Scene Management like before. This is important as of course we want to go between scenes. In our new function, we're going to want to add SceneManager.loadScene, and we're going to do collision.name. Now this is because our variable collision gives us all the data related to the object we have just collided with. And by doing collision.name, we're actually going to get the name of the object in our hierarchy, and as previously mentioned, we've named this Scene 1. Therefore, this should move us to the scene called Scene 1. Again, this is case sensitive, so make sure it is identical to the scene you want to move it to. So now if I play the game and I push D, we'll move to the right, and as you can see when we hit it, we go to Scene 1. And then of course if we click the button on Scene 1, we go back to Scene 2. And this is sort of a loop. However, you can of course implement these features in your own way. Now you need to make sure in build settings that you have got the scenes here. Otherwise this will not work and you will get errors.